All right, we're live. This is the first time I do something like this. We're trying to do a big thing here. We got a presentation going on. I have my good friend right below me, Samma Hafeez, who's going to be presenting with me, and I'll be presenting with her. And we are presenting on how to stand out and get hired in a Corona economy. So without further ado, we have a time limitation. We want to keep this short and as beneficial to you as possible. So bear with us if there's any technical glitches. You could laugh out loud because we can't hear you, but let's do this together. Okay, let's do that. Okay, here we go. So a quick background for me, and then we'll jump straight to Samma as well. I founded Right Track Admissions. I'm an attorney based in California. I'm in Santa Monica, actually in my house in Santa Monica. And I've been doing admissions as well as professional services for almost 12, 13 years now. As a lawyer, I've done international development with the US government. I've also do private law. I do some commercial contracts, and currently now I'm working helping veterans get their benefits nationwide here in the United States. And also obviously involved in entrepreneurship at various levels with different initiatives that I've done with other people. Go ahead, Samma.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And just want to start off by saying that, like many of you, I am self-quarantining, albeit at my parents' house with my son because my husband is a healthcare provider. Like Hamada, I have had to reinvent myself over the course of my career for various reasons, and we'll kind of talk about some of those personal anecdotes as we get into today's content and discussion. But ultimately, for the last decade, I've really worked in various startup environments, primarily within the technology sector, although across different industries. And prior to that, had a short career in international development, worked for some well-known international research policy and development organizations. And so, in terms of as we're thinking about, kind of the challenge and the crisis that we're finding ourselves in, and based on some of the questions that you guys submitted, a lot of folks, are, considering a pivot or a transition at this time. And so I want to sort of, lend that perspective as we, have the conversation. And I think that Hamada's background certainly speaks sort of similarly to some of the ways in which you can creatively, pivot and reinvent yourself at this time. So excited to be here. And thank you, Hamada, for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you. So just quickly, as you can tell, one of the things that both Sam and I have done a lot of and invested a lot of our time in is education. For me, it's been a huge ability for me to, reinvent myself, upskill, build my networks, and so forth. So I've spent a lot of time in different universities doing various degrees, law, master's in public administration, master's in international relations, and my undergraduate at UCLA. Samma, I think you went to, go ahead.
Yeah, so I went to Cal or Berkeley, and was pre-med as most South Asian folks tend to start off, and eventually, landed in the history department, majored in history with a minor in global poverty studies. And if you're wondering how that relates to anything that I do or have done, well, I can answer that question. But from there, did a master's at the London School of Economics in development, and that really, kickstarted my career in the international development arena. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the audience might have about any of the programs that might be of interest to you at any of these schools. And Hamada and I actually met at Cal, so definitely has a special place in our hearts.
100%. Okay, so when you want to go through the agenda?
Yeah, so what we thought we would cover, again, based on the volume of direct messages I received on LinkedIn, and thank you for those of you who were courageous enough and brave enough to actually reach out and message me. I definitely want to salute you. It's not easy, but you're acting on your despair and your anxiety, and I think that's certainly the first step. So we want to, really be realistic about the economic situation, and so we'll kind of talk high level about, what's going on, where some of the challenges we're facing are, and also kind of look at some of the, the opportunities that are emerging from this crisis that I think that we should all be, looking forward to and reflecting on. And then we'll talk about who's actually hiring, so that as you're looking to maybe kickstart your job search, or if you've recently been laid off and don't really know where to start or how to pivot, we'll kind of talk about some of the industries and companies that are hiring. And then really practically and tactically want to kind of get into how you actually stand out in an economy that, is really challenged at the moment. And, certainly there's a lot of uncertainties rather that we're still working through. And so we want to make sure that you guys have the tools and the frameworks that you can apply immediately to begin to, work through this. And then we'll talk very practically about how we can help some of you one-on-one in a personal setting, if that's something that you're interested in. So with that, I will throw it back to you, Hamada, to kind of cover the COVID economic impact.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay, so what we see here is the obvious thing that I think everybody's been obsessing about and looking at every day. I know I have, and refreshed it, almost a macabre obsession with looking at what's happening around the world in terms of the different infection rates, death rates, and so forth, which has been very depressing, but it's been an incredible time in terms of the way people are viewing themselves, viewing those around them, thinking about their careers, their lives, how people are getting together and so forth. But there are obviously some doom and gloom. As of today, I think I checked, there was about 1.5 million people around the world have been infected with the coronavirus, with a further 80,000 that have passed away. And that is not just a human toll, but there's a massive economic toll as well. And in that case, you can see some of the snapshots of the different industries that have been severely impacted by the coronavirus. As of last month, there was about almost 5 million people filed for unemployment in the United States, with a further 32% estimated by the time that this coronavirus will hopefully start subsiding. 32% of the U.S. Workforce will also be unemployed. And there's about, as we indicated there, about almost 65 million jobs that may be at risk based on the type of work that they were doing, that is now they're no longer able to perform, whether it's because they can't go to their job site or whether it's just not deemed essential. So other than obviously the human toll, which is the most depressing and the saddest part of this whole experience, there's also a job and economic toll as well. But it would be too depressing to keep talking about that, because I'm sure you can tune into the news and see it. So what we wanted to do is also show you some of the bright spots that we hope will be able to benefit you as well. Right off the bat, you can see that people have connected with folks all across the world in unprecedented ways. I don't think I have FaceTimed in my whole life as much as I have in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I feel like I've become a pro. I feel more animated in front of the camera. So I guess in that way, the silver lining is that you become a little bit more extroverted behind the computer, so to speak. But I've been able to connect with family across the world, friends across the world, which has been a real boon. Some, I think you are there with your son enjoying, where is that?
Yeah. This is in Maryland, in my parents' suburban development. But I think for all the parents and the moms out there, this is such a special time, really a unique time for us to have an opportunity to spend a lot more time with our children, with our families. And so, and exercise. So I'm certainly taking advantage and, doing the best that I can in this quarantining situation. And, hopefully some of you are able to get out and do the same.
And I think that's really important, because what we need to realize is that we, in a way, since 2008, there's been so many innovations and inventions that have taken place that have almost prepared us, I wouldn't say seamlessly, but I would say in a way almost hit the ground running for this crisis. You can see some of the companies that have come about since 2008 that we are certainly leveraging in this time. Things related to entertainment, food delivery, e-commerce, LMS, which is learning management systems, and abilities to connect people with video conferencing and so forth. So these are some of the companies. If you haven't used them, please use them. If you have used them, then use them more, because these are going to be mechanisms that are going to help you get through this crisis, tried and tested with folks around the world. And these are what we were able to see as companies that not only are excelling and helping us, but are also in many cases hiring as well. And then right there, you can see some of the innovations that are really coming about from this crisis. We have a elbow door handle that was 3D printed. And 3D printing is obviously going through the roof, and we'll talk about that in terms of companies that are hiring. You can see the Danson ventilator that was created by Danson Company in England in only 10 days. When push came to shove, necessity is the mother of all innovation. And so a lot of people are repurposing their factories to create, protective equipment for hospitals and hospital settings around the world. And these are just some of the innovations there. What's that other one in the middle? I know you said your husband was obsessing about it. What was that?
It's a UV light virus killing robot. And so I think, we might start to see really interesting and unique applications of existing technologies that will help us hopefully fight the crisis at hand. And there's actually a company a block away from me that's creating, they won the federal grant recently to create a in-home self-testing coronavirus kit. And so fingers crossed that, this company is successful and can bring that, that resource to bear at this challenging time. But it's amazing what folks are coming up with. And if this inspires any of you and speaks to you, certainly we're happy to kind of talk about, what it takes to be an entrepreneur and actually start your own business. Hamada is a small business owner and has been running Right Track for over a decade and can certainly talk through his personal experience. But hopefully this inspires you to take advantage of the current situation and really channel that anxiety, that frustration, that despair into something that's productive and can have a positive impact on the world.
I fully agree. And you could just see some of the companies that I found this on Instagram. Somebody had posted it, which I thought was really, really telling. You can just see the companies that popped out of the last crisis. Again, through necessity is the mother of all innovation. And I think through adversity, do we really rise to the occasion? And all of these companies were created just before, during, or just after the last economic crisis, which people thought would be the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. And you can see there, a lot of these companies are very, very strong and are growing stronger and stronger every day. I mean, we're using WhatsApp, we're using Instagram, we're using Slack, we're using Venmo, we're using a lot of these services, Dropbox and so forth today in this crisis. So exactly like Samma said, the idea is, there's ways to channel what seems to be a lot of pent up, stress and anxiety and time on your hands to do things that have a greater purpose. So that's just kind of giving you a sense of where we stand today. What is the doom? What is the gloom? And also what are the silver linings and what you can do during this time, at least during this crisis. Let's go ahead and shift over to who is hiring. In here, you could see very, very quickly right off the bat, we did almost like a data dump, because that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of information out there. We highlighted a couple of the key ones. We've talked about some of them. Again, a lot of things that come out of it is really the essential consumer goods, essential retailers, essential services that are coming out that basically are still hiring. Governments hiring, medical device companies are hiring, companies that were able to repurpose their own business operations are hiring. So there are mechanisms to hire. And I was talking to some about this just recently and said, well, what happens if should somebody jump on board and get a job if they're unemployed right now and it doesn't look like they're going to get rehired by their company? Should they jump on board and apply for a job with Amazon or like telehealth or something, simply just to have a job? And I think what we concluded was, look, if there's a transferable skill that you can gain from the job you get right now with one of these companies that are still hiring, go for it. if the job is so niche and it prevents you from being able to expand your skill set, reinvent yourself, we'll be talking about that a lot. If you cannot do that, then it may be better to kind of hold off, weather the storm by trying to see if your company will take you guys back, or try to keep trying to looking for a job within your industry, then try to jump ship to something that's completely going to change everything and it's not going to be transferable. So I think you need to think about the transferability of the skills that you would gain if you were to get a job with one of these companies that are still hiring. Anything on that, Samma?
No, I think you expressed that sentiment really well. And I will just add to, you know, as you're embarking on your search and trying to align your experience and your skill sets and your interests with opportunities that are actually, you know, tangible and promising and will hopefully sustain through the crisis, consider looking at companies that whose stock you know, values have increased during this period, or companies that have recently raised a round and are likely to have sufficient runway. So, you know, this is just a quick list to kind of get, you know, your juices flowing and give you kind of a starting point. But fundamentally, I think it's about looking at, you know, if you're looking to actually, you know, get hired at this particular juncture, just, you know, considering the volatility, I would be looking at the financial health and viability of any given organization or company that you're looking at. If you're looking at the nonprofit sector, then you'll certainly want to ask questions in your interviews around kind of their funding security and you know, the kind of donor profile that you know, they have access to. So you know, I'll pivot back to you, Hamada.
Okay. And these are, again, some of the top employers. We gathered this data from Career Builder, a great tool. Props to Samma for finding this, because that's exactly right. Career Builder, I don't know if monsters.com still has the same efficacy in this field, but you can look at the different Indeed, and there's a few others out there of forums that allow you to see different job postings. We gathered this data from there. You can see Amazon is also obviously going bananas trying to hire folks, because God bless Amazon. They're still delivering essential and non-essential stuff to people, giving them not only the volatility of what they need, but also giving them hope. I mean, I cannot tell you how many things I've ordered. I just got this new chair. I got my desk set up. I got an extra monitor. I got all kinds of stuff to make my workstation at home as comfortable and as motivating as possible, because these are the kind of things that you need. And companies like Amazon are delivering. I ordered stuff on Wayfair, on Best Buy. So definitely want to keep helping the economy. Spend some of the money that you've saved to be able to give yourself the best environment possible, to be as productive as possible. And you can see that a lot of these companies are doing well. Exactly like Samma said, I actually just invested a tiny little bit of amount in companies like Home Depot and so forth, because they're growing and they are, there's going to be a need for Home Depot in terms of construction, in terms of just, DIY, do-it-yourself kind of stuff during this period. And you can see a lot of these things, if their stocks are growing and they have sufficient capital, then that's a definite something that it would be interesting for you to kind of consider. So that's just a quick summation. And again, maybe somebody can say a couple of things about like how to search for things like that. What are some of the things to look for when they're doing their own searches?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, looking at trending hashtags that recruiters are using, certainly one way of, you know, identifying timely and relevant conversations that people are having now. The beauty that you know, the beautiful or the upside of this situation is that people are being incredibly generous with their time right now on LinkedIn. So I would follow recruiters in your industry or in industries and areas that you're interested in. A lot of them are willing to reflect their experience or provide job referrals or give you kind of insights into who's hiring. There are also, you know, depending on the industry, the technology customer success community that I'm a part of has been, you know, incredibly generous about posting job openings, reassuring folks that have been laid off that, you know, there are other opportunities that they're willing to refer them to. And there are Slack channels that people are inviting each other to as well. So try to find those communities and, you know, find out where those conversations are taking place. And, even if you don't need a job or you're not looking right now, you might be able to help somebody. So join the conversation just to be able to maybe pass some valuable information along. So hopefully that helps some of you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, let's jump into some of the meat of this presentation. So I'll hand it over to you, Samma.
Yeah. So, how do we actually stand out and differentiate ourselves at this time? One thing that I want to be really clear on is that the fundamental success factors remain the same in that, to get hired and stand out, you do need to put in a considerable amount of work. Anytime that I've been back on the market looking for a job, it's really been a full-time job. That's not to say that, some of us might not get lucky from time to time, or maybe we're just naturally so, gifted and talented that we don't have to actually put in the effort and the time. But I think that's probably far few of us. And so, what I want to go into, if you can kind of go into the next slide, is sort of the key considerations that you need to be, making and reflecting on as you, design your resume and begin preparing yourself for kind of the job market and for a job interview. So the key areas that you want to, self-evaluate against are skills and education, meaning, can you do the job? Do you have the skills and the ability to actually perform in the role that you are currently, evaluating? And if you don't, then this may be a great opportunity for you to step back and consider whether you need to go back to school, obtain a particular certification or a license, or maybe, take time to read, study, take online courses, or consider apprenticeships. And so these are just, a couple of the key areas that you'll want to consider, potentially upskilling or self-evaluating against. So ultimately, from an employer's perspective, they're scanning your resume and your profile and asking themselves, well, can this person actually do this job? And so, try to keep that perspective top of mind. Hamada, if we can go to the next one. Mm-hmm. And then your experience and your track record. So sometimes we don't actually have the skills or the educational profile that is best aligned for a particular job, just description. And that's, something that I've personally struggled with. And when I transitioned from international development to, the tech sector in the Silicon Valley, I really had to, leverage my personal experience and my track record to really trump some of the, skill gaps in my profile. And so, when employers are looking at your experience and your track record, they want to know whether, your professional history speaks to the ability to actually perform when on the job. So it's one thing to get hired, but it's another thing to stay employed. So, how long have you remained employed at any one given, organization or company? And if you've jumped around a lot, there's certainly ways to overcome that. I have moved a number of times, and so, have had to explain some of the jumps in my resume and background as well. But consider your work history, and then really think about what you accomplished and how you accomplished, what you did in that particular role. I think having an impact-centric resume and profile that really speaks to, not so much what you did, but how what you did actually had tangible impact on the organization or on the employees that, or a part of that organization or company is really important and profound. Resumes are often just reviewed or screened for like 30 to 60 seconds. So, having a few numbers that can help quantify and summarize the impact that you had are really critical. And then any awards or publications are always icing on the cake. Certainly validate anything that you've done. And especially if you have anything that's publicly available or that's in the public domain, an opportunity for you to highlight that and invite somebody to maybe go Google search your name or review those publications. And then any thought leadership. So if you've given any TED Talks or, if you've, had an opportunity to interview or contribute to any guest blogs or, valuable publications or resources online or communities highlight that. I think, it speaks to your ability to go above and beyond and take initiative and extend yourself outside of your, job domain. And I think that cross-functional skills are what most employers are looking for today. I think we have really moved past a monopathic view of the ideal candidate's job profile. And I think keep that in mind. I think polypaths are going to really be able to win the day as we move forward and transition through what was for most people an on-prem job function and is now transitioning into more of a remote situation to manage through the crisis. And frankly, that might sustain. I don't know what you think, Hamada. Do you think a lot of jobs are going to remain remote after this crisis ends? What are your thoughts on some of the changes that employers might be considering at this time?
I mean, look, and every company that I'm working with now, I mean, the admissions company has been remote from the jump. It was an easier way to manage, and we always manage the expectations of our clients by telling them that, we don't front face with them because they're all over the world. And we are more than sufficient to be able to do Skype calls and, a lot of video conferencing. So that's worked from that perspective. Another company I work for from a legal perspective, and the law tends not to be so tech savvy. And in that case, I'm already taking court cases where judges and the claimants and myself are all on a call, and it works. We are basically 2.5 weeks ago, we were still going into an office, or 3 weeks ago. And then suddenly they're like, you got to get out of the office and you got to be home. And so we've basically reinvented all kinds of things to make things more compatible and easy. And frankly, it's saving overhead costs in terms of basic utilities. And I know the government, which tends to be way behind, tech initiatives and so forth. When I was working with the Department of Commerce, they had telework days once every, I think, 2 weeks. That was already baked into our job functionality. And because of that process, again, it allowed everybody to jump seamlessly into the thing. So I would imagine, number one, security, video conferencing, exchanging of documents, all these things are going to be made even more and more simple, tried and tested in different companies in different sectors. And then number two, and this is a question I'm going to have for you towards the end, is how do you negotiate with an employer to say, listen, I really enjoy working from home. I'm very productive working from home. I feel more secure working from home. How can I negotiate that my full-time job, which is saying on the resume or on the job description that I have to be in the office, how can I negotiate that so that I could telework part of the time or all the time? So I definitely think there's going to be a shift over to that area for good and for bad. Good in some ways, because it's obviously going to create mechanisms to do a lot of things. You can parent, you can share things, you could save costs and so forth. And also there's going to be some negative connotations from that in terms of commercial real estate may go down, office space may go down. That fraternity that we have of people kind of co-working in a similar space may go down as well. But, there are going to be some pros and cons as it comes out of that space.
Great. So thanks for sharing your perspective, Hamada. Totally agree. And I think for folks who are horrified at the thought of having to telework indefinitely, could certainly address those concerns. I've worked remote, have hired people remotely, worked with remote teams. And so if you are challenged by having to suddenly work remote, then, that's certainly a whole conversation that we can have, and can certainly point you towards some really valuable resources. There are also companies that are all remote and really kind of spearheading the way in which we can, build businesses from the ground up without ever having to rent an office space and hire talent where talent lives, as opposed to having to uproot people and ask them to move. And so, certainly want to address that if that's of concern to anybody at this time. Now, the networking piece here, one thing that I want to be honest about is that, referrals at the end of the day are what companies are looking for as they're looking to fill positions. Anywhere I've worked, there's been a referral bonus that's been offered to employees who can refer, valuable candidates. And if they get hired, you typically get paid out 90 days after that person joins. And the reason referrals are so valuable is that, people that and that you have worked with and can, vet and reference tend to not only make it through an interview more successfully, but there are actually data points that suggest that companies are able to actually retain those employees for longer, and that those employees tend to actually perform or outperform in the job functions that they're hired for. So it's, not that we just want to hire, your friends or our friends, but it's that the people that we know in our personal networks, they've been vetted to a degree, and, we have personal experience and perspective that we're bringing to the table. So these are not random candidates whose character and experience and track record is in question. If you've worked with somebody who is absolutely amazing and incredibly intelligent and good at what they do, then that speaks volumes to what they're going to be able to continue to do and excel at in the future. So it's important as you're looking to build your network, that you're building a relevant network. Quality over quantity, is really key. Sometimes I notice that people will randomly go on like a DM, or like a LinkedIn, ad sprint. And I hate when people just randomly add me on LinkedIn without a private message. I think it's disrespectful, and I think it's, in poor taste. Go the extra mile of adding a personal note and making it clear why you want to connect with somebody. People are pretty reasonable, are likely to accept if you do that. The size of your network, that's something that will naturally grow as, you progress along your career. But, it takes an effort to grow your network. And, I think that we need to be really clear about the fact that networking, can be exhausting, but it can be rewarding too. And sometimes the best way to network is to network without an intention, without a purpose. And what I mean by that is that, you're looking to build connections by actually providing valuable services or paying it forward. And you never know when that good karma is going to, come back and help you in the future. So, if you have a really small network, that could be a disadvantage for you at this time, in particularly as, the job market is shrinking and also becoming more competitive. Think about how you can build that network so that it can serve you, and folks can, hopefully refer you to opportunities that might be of interest. And then also, consider the age and diversity of your network. And this applies to anybody, whether you're a seasoned professional. It actually helps you to have younger people in your network, and people of color and folks across kind of the globe that, are a part of, the overall universe that that you operate in. And that could benefit you later as you become a manager and need to hire people. If you need to travel to a particular place, both Hamada and I are avid travelers, and we absolutely love exploring and go. I think Hamada has been to almost every country on the planet. So, certainly hit him up for travel advice. But it's amazing how many times my network has come through as I've traveled to a new place, wanted to explore a new place. I've had so many random meetups in so many, different cities across the world. And sometimes those, conversations that you have, in a coffee shop or at a park, are so memorable and stay with you for so long that it's really easy to reactivate those conversations and those connections later on. And you just never know how, your network might be able to serve you in the future. So really consider, with the time that you have right now, and with the time that everybody frankly has as we're, self-quarantining and remaining at home, this is a great opportunity for you to reach out and seek help and start building your network. So consider that. Hamada, anything that you want to add here?
Yeah, I actually had a question for you, because what we've had is we've been able to collect quite a few questions from people that responded to the professional self-assessment. One of the questions we had was, I've been finding the most success with getting myself noticed through a one-on-one networking until I can have an informal interview with someone on the team. What's some other ways I can leverage my network to get my resume in the right hands? And I also kind of think that with the backdrop that a lot of people are not interfacing, not taking coffee dates, obviously, given the circumstance that we're in right now. What are the ways that people can get their resumes in the right hands other than just one-on-one networking?
That's a really great question. And I definitely have an answer to that. So when a few jobs ago, I was in the same boat trying to figure out how to get my resume in the right hands. And what I ended up doing, maybe out of fit of desperation and realizing that I had nothing to lose, was I tried to figure out who the hiring manager might be for that department. So I looked up the executive in that particular domain, and I ended up sending him a private message on LinkedIn. But I did my homework. I wrote a really thoughtful message. I made it clear that I had read about the company, that I had, researched this individual's background, and I tried to tailor my message in a way that would invite him to have a phone conversation with me or be open to a coffee, chat. And he responded. I ended up meeting this executive at a Starbucks. And we had a great conversation. Again, I prepared for that. And that led then to a series of interviews that actually helped me land a job. So, you can directly message people and contact people. You'd be amazed sometimes at how, tired and exhausted they are at looking for the right candidate. And so demonstrating initiative, but what I call thoughtful initiative that has, taken some preparation and really, demonstrates that, you kind of do your homework beforehand, I think can help you maybe overcome some of the challenges that you're facing with connecting with people in your current network. So, I guess try it out and see how it works. And if you have any questions on how to actually write or approach somebody with a thoughtful message or thoughtful line of communication, please feel free to reach out. That's something that we are more than welcome. From the audience.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, this is something I even suffer from. Sometimes I add people exactly to your chagrin. The other times I do is I would put a message together, but maybe just go through half the research, while I really need to be more thoughtful myself in how I would approach it in terms of direct messaging on LinkedIn. So maybe there's a way that if anybody has a question, especially geared towards to Samma, where she can probably outline, what things to look for quickly in a company when you're quickly reviewing that, so that you can put together a thoughtful message that's not too long, so that you don't bore them, but something that's really to the point, that grabs their attention, that shows that you've done the research and shows. And a lot of times what people advise is you don't ask for a job interview or anything more than that. You can just say, and in one case, I messaged somebody, said, I'm curious, given all your trajectory and what you've been able to do, and people love to hear themselves speak, just like to pick your brain about how I can pivot back into this sector or how I can do X, and love to get your insight into that. And then once you start talking to them, and if you establish that rapport, then essentially it's going to be a lot easier to shift from that to, hey, well, listen, I have a resume if you'd like to take a look at it. And then maybe if there's an opportunity to speak to other people on your team. So you try it and you do it authentically, genuinely. If you don't have that rapport with them, then you just got some great information. You can move on with your life and then pay it forward to somebody else. But I think that's always important, is to come off in a very humble way and saying, look, I want to learn from your experience. And I know people have hit me up for that. I'm sure they've hit up Samma for that in terms of our experiences. And we've always been more than happy to talk about that and provide that input to them. Okay, shifting to the professional maturity journey, Samma?
Yeah, so what I'm attempting to do here, and really the reason I put this slide together, was kind of help folks like us really self-evaluate where we currently stand. So I think sometimes it's important to take a step back and honestly reflect on where we are in our own personal journeys. And so whether you are currently in college or in grad school and you haven't ever worked, and maybe you're looking to land your first job, or you're an executive and you've been working in your field or domain for a number of years, it's an opportunity for all of us to really sit back and identify where some of the gaps in our experience and our knowledge really lie, or if we're really being truthful to our personal values and kind of the impact that we want to have and leave. And I think that the coronavirus and just the number of people and lives that are being lost is kind of bringing I think some of these reflections and this need to introspect to kind of prioritizing that at this time. So consider this just a framework for, self-evaluating, your own progress and your experience at this time. And, what we asked you to do was to fill out a professional assessment online, mainly so that we can start to bring relevant resources to bear and, deliver more topic specific webinars and or cohort specific webinars that are really focused on individuals in each one of these stages. So today, we recognize that this may be a very broad, high-level conversation. It wasn't intentionally designed to do that because, the number of people that kind of wrote in and submitted the assessment really ranged across this spectrum. But as we, progress and are likely to be, quarantined at home for, at least the next few weeks, our intention is to continue to kind of go deeper. And next week, we're going to focus on students that are in graduate school or in college looking to land their first job. And so if we go to the next slide, Hamada, really, no matter where you're at, this is the perfect time to sit down, carve out a few hours and build your personal success plan. And, what is a personal success plan? Ultimately, this is, an outline and a summary of, where you want to essentially, land. And the way that you start is by reverse engineering kind of the course and the path based on, the impact and the legacy that you want to leave behind. I think I've never thought about my own death or demise so much as I have in the last, few weeks. And I don't mean that to scare anyone or frighten anyone, but I think that this has been such a wonderful opportunity for me to really think about, should I find myself on my deathbed? What are some of the things that I want to make sure I definitely don't regret and that I do? And how do I, recenter and, ensure that I am prioritizing the right things and spending and investing my time and my energy in the right places and with the right people. So I think you can start to really reflect, your own truths through that exercise and kind of design your legacy, really think about what those priorities are. And then from there, goal set. What are some of the things that you're going to have to do to practically achieve those goals? What kind of resources or help are you going to have to seek? Often we think that we have to achieve our goals all by ourselves. No, that's not the case. This is a great time to, seek mentorship, seek guidance. If you don't have a mentor, if you don't have a set of individuals that, can help you keep yourself accountable, then this is a great time to find those people. Sometimes we spend hours and hours planning and, planning to a fault almost and completely lack on the execution side. And ultimately, the people that are the most successful definitely have a strategy and a plan, but they are very execution focused and they make it happen. So, how are you going to actually schedule and carve out your time to implement or achieve those goals? And that might mean deprioritizing other commitments or being really honest about, how much you can handle at one given time and really learning how to say no. And if you've never had to say no to anything, then you probably need to, you're probably doing too much and you're probably spending time and energy in areas that maybe, you shouldn't be. So, if you need help creating a personal success plan, there's a wonderful book called Living Forward that I recommend you read. But beyond that, I've had to do this with clients. I've done this with peers. I've done this with my own teams. And so if this is something that you want help with, certainly happy to, lend my guidance. And, I'm sure Hamada has a lot that he can personally add here as well. I don't know, Hamada, if you want to add anything that really speaks to sort of the way in which you've had to reinvent yourself over the last 15 years,
Yeah, and I also want to be mindful of the time. We're closing in on 45 minutes, but I'll quickly say this. I've charted a course myself for good and for bad that was probably a road less traveled, in the fact that I prioritized I guess, my health, my family, travel, and experiences that really kind of give back to humanity. So as I said, I work with veterans now. Prior to that, I was with the US government doing civic service. I've been doing admissions consulting for quite a while, and I've tried to steer away from certain other areas because I really want to do things that kind of gave back. Other things that kind of helped me in a quick cheat sheet and a quick way of doing what Samma here is outlining is take a look at somebody who's doing something that you really want to be doing on LinkedIn. Take a look at their course, right? Reverse engineer their course. You can start from the bottom, see what education they received, what certifications they have, even the recommendations they've received as well, and then see what jobs they've taken on, what roles they've taken on, and try not necessarily to mirror, but see as that would be a mechanism of giving you some kind of guidance, some kind of a light that you can kind of aim for if it's difficult for you to kind of figure out, well, I really want to go into product management. Well, I'm right now, and this is, other questions that we've had. One question that we have right now is how to transition to a different, more fulfilling role with existing skill sets and experience. So that was a question that we've got. Another one was, what advice would you give someone shifting to a different role industry with transferable skills, e.g. nonprofit data analysis to UX research at a tech company? Both of those are great questions, all about reinvention, all about trying to find a different pivot. And the way I guess that you can do that, look at the success plan. Hopefully we'll be providing you guys with some proprietary material that you would be able to use in trying to go through this guidance from our experiences. The other thing, as I said, is always use LinkedIn as a back end mechanism where you can see somebody who may be in, interested in or providing you, shifting into a UX research position. And then you say, okay, well, this person went into UX and this is how high they've come. How did they get there? And you could look at a couple of different people and then find some kind of path that does make sense for you, and then plot it out. And if you're lucky, exactly like Samma said, is then you can direct message them. Now that you've looked at their profile, you've understood it, you can have very pertinent questions. And the person would say, wow, this person doesn't want to just have coffee with me. This person wants to know exactly how I transition from X to Y. And, Samma has done it from international development to technology. I've bounced around between different areas of law and also small business and entrepreneurship. How did I do it? What were the different paths I took? Some of them were learning experiences. Some of them were mistakes that I'm happy to share with you. So that's kind of a little bit of my input on that. Let's kind of go through the next couple of slides a little on the quicker side so that we can get to some more of the questions at the tail end of this.
Yeah, so really all that I want to sort of address here is the fact that, you really need to stand out at every stage of the application cycle. Don't think that your job is done, after you've applied, and it takes a considerable amount of effort at each one of these stages and intentionality to actually be successful. And so, I think future webinars, we can certainly, based on the audience's, interest and feedback after following this conversation, we're happy to, go deep on any one of these areas to kind of help you, progress depending on where you're at. But just, at this point in time when the economy is, shrinking and jobs are becoming far more competitive, just consider the fact that, throwing your resume over the fence or winging it for an interview, that's probably not going to land you the job at this stage.
Okay, and then another quick question I want to address while we're in the middle of all of this. I think we'll get to that. Actually, right here is where it's going to come up. And I'm going to give you the question, and I think that will help because, guys, don't forget, you can email us at the end of this presentation to info@RightTrack We'll be happy to send you this exact presentation. We'll also be uploading this webinar for folks to see who were able to make it today. So don't stress out about trying to grab all this incredible data points that Samma has put together in these very artful images that really capture what we're trying to say in a very quick way. But let me quickly throw a question to you. Another question we received, again, quite a few times was, do we need to change our resume based on the position we are applying for? And what is the best way to apply to a position, reach a recruiter, or direct apply, or anything else that I may be missing? So I know that's something that you're mentioning here, but maybe you can also kind of zero in on that because that was a question that we got quite a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you do need to tailor your resume to the job role or function for a few reasons. So number one, depending on how you end up applying, a lot of job applications go through an application tracking system. And those systems will capture keywords from your resume and then, align them or boost your profile within that system accordingly. It all kind of depends on, the algorithms that are at play, but just kind of keep that in mind. You want to submit ATS-friendly resumes. And that means oftentimes avoiding a lot of the fancy graphics and templates that you find out there, because when those are actually fed into an application system, they're not necessarily able to kind of read a lot of that fancy content. And then, to your point about having a generic resume, I think as you're drafting your resume or refreshing it or bringing it up to speed, you can have a generic resume, but it's not one that you would actually submit. It's something that you kind of use as a core template or building block or foundation as you begin your search. As you narrow down your search and are ready to actually apply for a job, at that point, you do need to make sure that your resume actually speaks to the job that you're applying for. So, modifying or editing your resume to include a lot of the keywords in that job description, or looking at that particular job profile and, looking for people on LinkedIn that are in those jobs and looking to see how they are positioning themselves online. Consider using some of the industry lexicon and verbiage in your resume and reframing the impact and the experience that you've had in a way that resonates with that hiring manager so that they consider you for that role and can see you in the job. So I would, essentially, caution anyone against submitting a general resume. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, and I can tell you the way that we work in terms of RightTrack, in terms of a service, we do this quite often with clients. We work on creating a generic resume and a generic cover letter, right, as the starting point, and then make it in a way where they can readily see where they can make the tweaks. So once we created that as a building block, so maybe even longer than you want it to be, then we can shrink it down and show the client exactly where the modifications need to be made, where that research needs to be done, so that they can kind of fill it in and really tweak it for the purpose of the employer. Or if it's not just the employer, because sometimes it's overkill and it's impossible if you're applying to 10 different jobs or 20 different jobs to keep tweaking it for that employer. Almost becomes disingenuous in a certain way because you're just trying to shove things just for that employer. You can have it for sector specific resume. So right now, for example, I have a resume for education. So when I want to teach, I have a resume for that really highlights those publications, speaking opportunities, teaching experience, and so forth. I have a resume for international development for work that I do in that space. I also have a resume for legal work and really focus on that. And that's not tailoring it to a specific only job, especially if in the interest of time, but at least tailoring it to a sector and then applying that to the sector. And if you're not applying to various sectors and crazy like me and schizophrenic in terms of all the things you love to do, then you can apply it for certain areas or like verticals within that market. So if you're applying for tech, you can have one that's really tech heavy, one that's a little less so, and so forth, and submit that to the different employers. We have some more information here about when to apply. And again, I want to, just, is there anything you want to highlight on this in this slide particularly?
Yeah, I think that honesty and authenticity are really critical, right? So I think a lot of us, when we do want to kind of reinvent ourselves or figure out how to best position our experience or our skills, might feel like we need to overinflate, what we've accomplished or what we've done. And I don't think that's the case. I think, again, it's all about framing and telling the story in a way that's going to resonate with a hiring manager. And that takes some research. It takes some work. It's an art that you can develop, but it's certainly, not something that, can't be overcome. But I just want to caution you against, lying or overstating anything that you've maybe done. I see candidates attempt to do that sometimes, and it's so obvious. And as people actually seek your references, once, you're kind of at a later stage when they're considering you more seriously, sometimes your references will, provide really honest and critical feedback on your performance or kind of on the job profile that you had. So just keep that in mind. It's really important to be honest when applying.
Yeah, and I think that's I can't even tell you how many times. I mean, obviously, you remember that classic incident that happened with Yahoo when the person I think was nominated to be a CEO, and they found out that he in fact had not received a PhD at that certain program. That's all it took to basically destroy that person's candidacy, and I think they had to resign from it. So you always want to be very honest, especially about things that can be followed up on, and you also want to be very smart about who you select to actually provide your references. You don't want somebody who's a wishy-washy or on the fence, because that will deep six an opportunity, whether it's for applying to schools and the recommendation letters you receive, or even the interviews, the recommendations that you would get for different jobs. So be very sure, and make sure that you also contact them in advance that they're going to be a reference, because last thing you want is you plop them on as a reference, they contact you, you're like, I don't even know, the person didn't even tell me that they were applying for jobs or what have you. So you want to be very mindful of that. And again, I want to be mindful of the time. We're closing in on 55 minutes. I want to keep this to a strict hour. So just for this one, again, preparing for interviews, there's some really good nuggets in here that you should be thinking about in terms of when you do that. Again, this is something we'll cover when it comes to the interview process for applying to schools. And if you get an interview at a different school, like an MBA or even undergrad level, but also when you're thinking about and applying to jobs and going in for the interview, you obviously, just a couple of quick tips from that point is you do want to have questions for the interviewer. That's number one. That gives you confidence when you walk in there, just in case there's none of those awkward, crazy silences. And they're like, okay, any questions for us? I know I do that. And I love to check the due diligence of the person to see what kind of questions they have. So it's not just a question, it's the quality of the question. Number two is make sure that you do investigate who is interviewing you, so that you have a better sense of the kind of ways that you can question, and even your disposition towards that person in the interview itself is very, very helpful. I was on the interview panel at Harvard for the fellowship that I had received when I was at the Kennedy School. And that was something that I constantly saw, is that when people actually had done the research on me, it really showed. And when I was on their side and I was interviewing for that fellowship, I remember having questions for every single one of those people that were on the interview panel. And that helped me a lot, I think, as well, to make me seem more genuine, personable, and interested in the position. And let's jump now just to really how we can help in the process. I'm sorry, Sam, is there anything you want to quickly add to this slide?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add here is that part of preparing for an interview is, actually anticipating the questions that are going to be asked and taking the time to thoughtfully kind of outline what your responses might be, and really reflecting back, responses that address any perceived gaps or weaknesses in your resume, anticipate what those are going to be, address them, and then ask for feedback during those interviews. But I think the more that you prepare to answer those questions ahead of time, and you can research the STAR method, that's one great way of actually succinctly responding to questions in an interview setting. But that can help you actually go in feeling far more confident and ready to address any perceived challenges, and then manage your own anxiety, accordingly as well.
And get ready for interviews that are remote as well. It's not like I'm sitting here in my pajamas, but you want to make sure that you are dressed to the point. You have a good background that's not crazy, but there is a high likelihood, I would imagine you'd agree, where at least for the next, a couple of months, interviews will be done more remotely. And so you want to be ready for what that looks like. And I know for us, again, when we were interviewing folks for that fellowship at Harvard, everybody was given the opportunity to get on Skype. I remember one individual was doing it from some remote location in the middle of nowhere, wearing a beanie on their head and a baggy sweater. And I don't know why that didn't make me feel good about it. Not because I like people to dress down and chill. As you can tell, hopefully by my personality, I'm not somebody that's overly formal and professional, but it is still that you have to keep up appearances, because the way that you dress and project yourself is also, speaks to the person that you're speaking to. And if you, tone yourself down too far, you become too colloquial, you dress down too much, you don't, take care of your hygiene and so forth, that does come across as probably a lack of respect for the process and for that individual and for the company.
Yeah, look, we don't have control over that right now. Many of us don't have control over where we're actually self-quarantining. We might not be able to get a haircut or really shave. Just, give the recruiter or the hiring manager a heads up to let them know that, hey, in a more, in an ideal situation, I would have actually, made an effort. You might want to just kind of preface or, give that individual a heads up so that they don't, judge you based on some of those limitations.
Yeah, 100%. Or you could cut your hair like I cut my own hair. So just get those clippers and go to town and see what happens. Okay, let's quickly wrap it up with how we can help you. As I said, Right Track's been in business for over a decade. We started the company in 2008. The story is interesting. I was working at a top 50 law firm after graduating from Berkeley Law. I had just passed the bar, thank God, because that was a freakish experience. And while I was working, one of my friends came in to, hey, listen, I'm thinking about, creating this company. And I'm sure some of you are probably, you knew about Right Track from the jump because I was right after we were in school together at Berkeley. It came about because I said to myself, you know what, I'm in this job. I'm working as a corporate attorney. I just graduated, just passed the bar. In any given circumstance, everything's going to be fine. And I'm going to continue to graduate from a top school and so forth. The reality was, and somehow I said to myself, hedge. Create a little side gig, have a side hustle. It'll maybe help you out. So in your off hours, you can do something else that kind of, A, spending the time, and B, kind of developing other core skills. And so I started the admissions company right in that economic crisis. And lo and behold, probably just under a year later, I was laid off from that law firm. It was a bloodbath and everybody was laid off from a lot of top law firms. And I continued Right Track. And that mentality of, and it was also a struggle for me to get into top programs because every standardized test I took, I bombed. I did horribly in them, but I ended up getting into 4 of the top 12 schools in the world, whether it was University of Cambridge in England or Harvard or Berkeley or UCLA, and also getting in with substantial scholarships. So I use that mentality of hustling, of hard work, of understanding things are not just given to you to create this company. And that's what we've instilled with our own clients in their academic and their professional journeys. And we've helped over 1,000 clients in that interim period between 2008 and today. So that's the hustle that we have, that mentality that we have. And that's how we work with our clients. We understand that a lot of people are coming from a disadvantaged background. And now we're all in some way disadvantaged because of this economy. But because we're all disadvantaged, all kind of levels up in any event because we're all at the same situation. And so what we try to help people is through a very personalized approach. We have great folks on our team from across the world that really help with the resumes. We discussed those in brief today, and we'll discuss those further with cover letters, with LinkedIn profiles. Some questions that we had was, should I create a personal website with all the information about me, or would my LinkedIn suffice, or do I just have a resume? And I think LinkedIn, as you're seeing even from this perspective and from this presentation, is a phenomenal venue where you can really kind of coalesce all your professional networks. So really kind of making your LinkedIn profile fantastic, is if it's kind of half-baked, then people will see that and it's a reflection on who you are. You can see Samma's profile is fantastic. And a good example of mine, I've been trying to build it up, taking examples from other people and doing that, as well as just career guidance, which obviously, as Samma has alluded to and pointed out to, there's a lot that can come from that. And so what we want to do is we want to play our part. And that's kind of how all this started. Samma had basically gotten a lot of input from people asking for her assistance. I got input from people asking for my assistance. So we came up with this COVID Job Success Initiative, where we're providing these free webinars. We're going to have some free materials for you, including this presentation. As soon as you email us, we're willing to provide you with a free consultation, an intro consultation. And for the first 10 people that hit us up as soon as this webinar is over, we're happy to do a free job profile review for me and Samma. We're happy to do that for you. So please hit us up. The first 10 emails will get that benefit as well. Hit us up at info@righttrackadmissions.com. You can see it in the presentation right there. And in terms of next steps, we've got our next webinar, which we hope will be as well attended as this one has been, with all the questions that we have. So again, it's really it's for those people that are right now on the cusp and ready to graduate, whether they're graduate students going to be applying for jobs, whether they are college students getting ready to apply for jobs. So we're going to be helping you with that, using some of the materials we covered today, but getting a little bit more in depth into it to provide you with those golden nuggets for you. And that's going to be again on April 15th. So this time next week, exactly this time next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time here in California, 1 p.m. Eastern time where Samma is, and 6 p.m. GMT in London time as well. And it will be again on LinkedIn Live, and we're also doing this on Facebook Live on the Right Track Admissions Facebook group. So please look out for that. Samma?
Yeah, and if any of the content today overwhelmed you, if you are really unsure about where to start, just remember, perfect is the enemy of progress. The first thing that you can do is to take that professional self-assessment and initiate a conversation. And again, we're coming at this from, a really personal place. Both Hamada and I have had, challenges, across our professional journeys and needed to seek help and recenter. And, while our frontline providers are really sacrificing at this time and, providing an invaluable, suite of services, we're trying, with the limited skills and knowledge, that we have to be able to bring some of our expertise to bear to help folks that are, experiencing layoffs or, who graduating from college or grad school thinking that they were going to be, graduating at an economic boom, high, are now finding themselves in, what might be a recession that's even worse and greater than the Great Recession of 2008. And so, this is, a desire to really give back and help you. So please feel free to reach out and initiate a conversation. I know it takes some courage to do that. But our intention is really to be able to provide some relief and guidance at this time. So
yeah, that's exactly right, Samma. That exact point where it's crazy. I mean, during Christmas, could you have ever anticipated that we'd be where we are today? And people who are in school expecting to go all guns blazing into the job market in the summer, or had even applied and maybe even secured jobs over the fall, are now seeing jobs rescinded, jobs deferred. So this is a very unprecedented time, and we want to be there as a guiding post for you. Again, we're going to be providing these free webinars. The next one coming up on April 15th. We'll also be providing free materials. And obviously, there's going to be people that need more personalized guidance. So please do hit us up. Email us at info@righttrackadmissions.com, or you can call us up at 888-RIGHT-TRACK, as you see right there. And we're happy to schedule consultations and so forth to be able to provide you with the best that we can and pay it forward, because both Sam and I have had very meandering, incredible life experiences in terms of our professions. Neither one of us have been in a job for more than X amount of years, because I think the fact is there's so much out there and so much cool stuff to do. And if you have that opportunity, do it. And this is an amazing, amazing time to self-reflect, reinvent yourself, upskill, and move forward in terms of your career. So without further ado, we want you to stay home and be home with us. Stay sane, stay safe. And thank you from us here at Right Track Admissions, from myself, Hamada Zahawi, and from Samma.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay.